Today, we're going to unpack the absolutely incredible story of an organization called Presbyterian Homes and Services, or PHS. Seriously, this is a 70-year journey that takes a simple, faith-based idea from Minnesota and turns it into one of America's most innovative and powerful leaders in senior care. Okay, let's get right into it.
So you have to ask yourself, how on earth does that happen? How does a small committee at a church, not a high-powered boardroom, not a bunch of venture capitalists, build a healthcare giant? That is the question we're digging into today. And the answer, well, it's not just about doing good deeds. It's a total masterclass in combining a powerful mission with some seriously brilliant strategy. To really get what makes PHS tick, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. The story doesn't start with a business plan or a pitch deck. It starts with a calling. Picture this. It's post-World War II America, and the country is just starting to realize that its population is getting older, and that's going to be a big deal. I mean, just listen to the language they used. The goal wasn't to capture market share or build a real estate empire. The mandate, the core idea, was to create a Christian ministry. And that right there, that foundational belief that serving older adults was a spiritual calling, that became their North Star for literally everything that came next. So the first couple of decades were all about just laying the groundwork. They got incorporated in 1950. By 55, they opened their very first community, Johanna Shores, on this gorgeous lakefront spot. But then 1965 happens, and the creation of Medicare and Medicaid, it was like a meteor hitting the entire industry. All of a sudden, this small faith-based ministry had to become a super professional, heavily regulated healthcare organization. And to make that kind of leap, you can't just have anyone at the helm. You need a very specific kind of leader. This brings us to the person and the philosophy that would truly shape the PHS culture for the next 50 years and just set the stage for unbelievable growth. Okay, this story is an absolute legend inside PHS. So in 1976, this young accountant, Dan Lind, comes on board. And get this, he turned down a corporate job that would have paid him 3 times as much. Why? Because he felt a vocational calling. He believed his skills with numbers could serve a higher purpose. That one decision tells you everything you need to know about the mission over margin idea that he would champion for the next 48 years. And this idea, this philosophy, he called stewardship. He basically baked it into the organization's DNA. Now, the key thing to understand here is that this wasn't some fuzzy money doesn't matter idea. No, it was the complete opposite. It meant you had to manage the money with incredible discipline, not just to make a profit, but to make sure the mission could survive, and more importantly, grow. And boy, did it grow. But here's the secret sauce. PHS didn't just grow by building more of the same. Their genius was looking at the biggest, toughest problems in the entire senior care industry and deciding, you know what, we'll just build the solution ourselves. And this right here is where the story gets really good. So, problem number 1, construction. Using outside developers was super expensive, and a lot of times the buildings just weren't designed well for providing care efficiently. Their solution? Classic PSS. They just built their own development company, Senior Housing Partners, or SHP. Suddenly they had total control over everything. The cost, the quality, the whole shebang. And to give you an idea of how well this worked, just look at that number. $3.5 billion. SHP got so good at what they did that they started working for other nonprofits too. It went from being an internal fix to a revenue-generating machine that actually made the whole nonprofit sector stronger. Okay, next up, they look beyond their own walls. They had this huge realization that, hey, most seniors don't want to move. They want to stay in their own homes. So boom, they launched Optage. This was their way to bring the care, the therapy, the hospice, even the meals directly to people wherever they lived. And again, the scale is just mind-blowing. Think about that for a second. Over 83,000 meals every single month. So on one hand, Optage is this huge service to the community. But on the other, it was also a brilliant way to build trust and relationships with families, often years before they ever needed to think about moving. The third piece of this innovation puzzle was tackling maybe the biggest disconnect of all, the huge gap between housing and healthcare. Just calling 911 every time something goes wrong is stressful and incredibly expensive. The solution was so simple it was brilliant. Instead of sending residents out to the doctor, they brought the doctors and nurses in. And this model was a total game changer. It serves over 15,000 people now. By getting ahead of health issues, they prevent emergencies, they slash hospital visits, and they lower the overall cost of care. This positions them perfectly for where healthcare is going, a world where you get paid for keeping people healthy, not just for doing procedures. So let's just step back and look at the whole picture. You've got SHP handling the buildings. You've got Optage reaching out into the community. And you have Genevive weaving healthcare directly into the fabric of daily life. It's this powerful, self-reinforcing system, an ecosystem really, that gives PHS an advantage that almost no one else can touch. So now they have this incredible innovation engine, right? So what's next? Well, they started aiming at even bigger, more complicated problems, things like finance, partnerships, and even reinventing urban living for seniors. Let's be real. Building these communities costs an absolute fortune. So they created this brilliant financial tool called FlexCap. Think of it this way. Instead of taking out a massive loan on day one, it let them borrow money just in time, only as they needed it. Then, once the place was up and running, they'd pay back the credit line, and poof, the capital was right there, ready to be recycled into the next project. It's like a financial flywheel for constant growth. They also got really creative with partnerships. They saw that many Catholic orders of sisters were in a tough spot. They had aging members who needed care, these huge historic properties they couldn't maintain, and they wanted to secure their legacy. PHS came in and offered a solution for everything. The result was these amazing communities where retired sisters live alongside other seniors. It was a perfect win-win. And they just kept evolving. They saw that baby boomers didn't necessarily want a quiet place in the suburbs. They wanted to be connected, to be able to walk to things. So PHS pivoted. They went from those quiet, leafy campuses to tackling things like dead shopping malls, transforming them into these vibrant, dense senior villages with shops and restaurants right there. It was a huge shift. So that brings us pretty much to today. And as PHS looks to the future, the world is a lot more complicated. They're dealing with new challenges, from a pandemic to a major labor crisis, and, for the first time in nearly half a century, a massive changing of the guard at the very top. But they're not just sitting back. They're adapting. They're making big strategic purchases. They're tackling the labor shortage with a super creative idea of building affordable housing for their own employees. And then there's the big one. In 2025, after an incredible 48-year run, Dan Lind is retiring. The torch is being passed to John Fletcher, the guy who used to run their development company, SHP, which tells you that smart strategic growth is still a huge part of their plan. And this is what it all adds up to. This is the result of that 70-year journey. From one single home, Lind and his team built the fourth largest nonprofit senior living provider in the entire United States. I mean, let that sink in. It is a staggering achievement, built one smart idea at a time. So we're left with this one big question. In a world that is so dominated by for-profit corporations and private equity, can an organization that started as a Christian ministry still compete? Can it still win? Well, the 70-year story of Presbyterian Homes and Services seems to have a pretty clear answer. It suggests that having a deep, powerful sense of purpose, when you combine it with brilliant execution, might just be the ultimate competitive advantage.